Thank you very much, everyone. That was really an incredible panel. You've given us a lot to think about, and it really helped to define some of what our next steps should be. I'm going to take just a couple of minutes to wrap up the workshop. I don't know if we can pull up my slides, if that's possible, Tim or Erin. Or Lori. Thank you, Lori. So if we can go to the next slide. I'm not going to obviously repeat all of the things that have been said over the last day and a half, but as so many people have said, we want to keep the focus on patients in particular, but clinicians as well. And when we think about everything, I think ultimately this needs to come down to how can patients and clinicians most benefit from advances in digital health? How can we facilitate improved communication between patients and their healthcare teams? How can we help patients with self-management, scale up and expand PROs, use telehealth to expand access to care? And it's obviously critical through all of this as we design these systems to have clinician and patient buy-in for adoption and use, or we'll be having the same workshop in a few years with no progress made. Next slide, please. Research really needs to be key in all of this. I think that we can't make assumptions about what digital applications are beneficial or not. We need to study them. And just like drugs or imaging or anything else we study, some will turn out to be useful and some will not. How can we redesign clinical trials to reach a broader spectrum of the patient population? Nan Shah talked about this and Paul Kutz talked about this today. We don't want to lose that. I mean, I think that's been incredibly beneficial. How can we enhance clinical databases to facilitate accrual of real-world evidence? And I think this has been highlighted by the COVID pandemic and our need for data more quickly. We need to really move this forward. I think there are a lot of good ideas that have been discussed over the last couple of days. And we just need to figure out, again, how to move forward quickly. And how can we understand care redesign as a result of the pandemic? How can we look at patient outcomes in regard to new paradigms of patient care? Next slide. There are lots of ethical, data security, and patient privacy issues, but I think one of the things that we need to emphasize is that they have to have patient-centered design. Again, they need to really meet the needs of the patients. No data aggregation without representation was one of the comments. And it was brought up over and over again that we need to consider the purpose of data aggregation activities, who's benefiting from them, and that can have a major impact. And we need to keep our promises to the stakeholders, particularly patients and their clinicians. We need to be able to validate digital health technologies and uncertain regulatory pathways. This is a complex landscape. We've heard from some of the people who are developing these technologies, and we've heard from the FDA. This is an evolving field. It's going to look different in the next couple of years as we all learn more about this. But we also need to pay a lot of attention to the biases to underrepresentation as a critical threat to validity that might exacerbate what are already existing health disparities. And this was again brought up by many of our speakers and has to be a focus of all of our work. Next slide. I'm not going to go into too much about this. You've heard a lot about it over the last couple of days. Medicine is not quick to change and develop. It's a complex environment in the U.S. With many states and state regulations and different payers. But we need to use the disruption that the pandemic has caused in the way we deliver care for benefit. It's been a terrible pandemic. It continues to be a terrible pandemic with unthinkable loss of life, but we have learned some things and we need to capitalize on what we've learned. Next slide. So my feeling is if we want to move rapidly in the development and use of digital health applications for the benefit of our patients, we need national will. The last comments that were made in the panel about different state regulations and our ability to understand those and how we manage our patients is critical. We need national will from the patients, from our clinicians, from the regulators, and from the payers to find a better path forward. I work in Philadelphia. New Jersey is just a couple of miles away across the Delaware River. And we have different regulations in the two states, in spite of the fact that almost half of the patients who come to Penn for care are from out of state. We need scientific method to direct us forward. We can't make assumptions, but we have the capability and the tools to do this. And finally, again, everything that we do needs to be focused on the benefit for patients. Next slide. Just a quick reminder that the NCI is looking for input on telemedicine in particular, and we heard a lot about telehealth in the last panel and throughout the workshop. They're looking to rapidly gain information on where we think the scientific gaps and research needs are related to the delivery of cancer care via telehealth. So this is our opportunity to try to move the field somewhat in the national way. So please take this seriously. It's a very short timeline. July 30th is just a couple of weeks away, but we need input from all the stakeholders. Next slide. I wanted to again thank the planning committee. We started meeting a long time ago before the pandemic and stepped up our meetings after the pandemic, and countless hours were put into planning this. And so thank you all very much. And really without you, we would never have had the lineup of speakers that we've had who have been terrific. And Ravi Parikh, who gave one of the talks yesterday on predictive analytics, will be the lead for our dissemination paper, which hopefully will get out in the near future. Next slide. Finally, really what makes all this work, as I think all of you know, is our incredible staff from the National Academies. And Erin, Lori, and Kate in particular guided us every step along the way and kept us going. And we are one tough group of cats to corral, but they were able to do it. And a lot of the success that you've seen over the last day or so is really due to them. And Annalie and Emily and Lynette and Cheryl also, thank you very, very much. So with that, we will end the workshop. But as I said earlier, this is really the beginning of a discussion, not the end. And we look forward to moving all these initiatives forward. Thank you to all of our speakers, to the staff, and to all of you listening.